So where do you start with a neglected garden? Mike and Natalie Newman moved into this house and garden around 4 years ago, and the garden was probably laid out about 150 years ago, 100 years ago in Victorian times, but in the last few decades had become very neglected. But now they've really turned it round. They've restored it and they've cleared out what didn't need to be there, they've kept what did need to be there, and actually they've done a wonderful job on keeping the spirit and the feel of the garden while updating it and making it work for a family today. I'll put links to any resources I mention in the description below, and if you're new here, the Middlesized Garden uploads weekly with tips, ideas and inspiration for your garden. So if you want to see the videos when you open up YouTube, tap subscribe. So Natalie, tell me what the garden was like when you arrived.
Very overgrown, that's the main thing. It had been rented for 15 years before we bought it, and obviously the tenants mow the lawn, but that's about it. So everything was grown into everything. There was obviously a lot of really nice trees, really nice plants, but they were overtaken by nettles taller than me, an awful lot of bracken, an awful lot of thistles. The lawn was a complete thistle bed. The grass was probably 2/3 and 1/3 thistles. It was extraordinary. And then we could see the potential. We loved the wall. We wanted a wall garden, and my husband was drawn in by the scale of it, the fact it was already established, and we could work with it rather than start afresh.
So we knew it was an enormous project, but the possibilities were just fantastic. And I was probably a little bit overambitious, but I was also reliant on the fact that Natalie is keen on gardening. So I was going to focus on the house, she was going to do the garden. Of course, it didn't work out that way at all. And then over on this side of the garden, there's the little bothy that's there and the greenhouse behind it. And there's something about that building that made me say, I've just got to buy this house. It was almost the bothy and the possibilities with the garden quite as much as the property itself.
How do you start? I mean, what did you make your priority?
Making it safe for the children was the first thing, because they were 4 and 7 when we moved in, and the thistles obviously just weren't right for the children. The first thing we did before we moved in was we had someone come and deal with a lot of the thistles. Once that was done, the next thing we did was clear the back. It was so overgrown in the end of the back garden where we've now got our wildflowers that we started to try and do it with a strimmer, but it was just absolutely ridiculous. So we got a company in with a big digger, literally strapped up the big trees and ripped them out. It was the only way to do it. And there was an awful lot of self-seeded elders. They still keep popping back up. So the first thing we did was clear that. And then we started area by area to think, what do we want to save? What is nice? What do we want to keep? And then take out and clear around it.
How did you decide what's had to go and what needs to stay?
That's quite tricky. Some of it was some research, lots of advice from lots of people. We've learnt a huge amount in 3 years, and I'll be completely honest, some of it was luck. Some of it was what survived, so we moved some things, and so it was a combination of all of those things. And of course Google is your friend, and there's some fantastic apps that you can get, and I work in IT. You point it at a plant and it gives you a sporting chance of working out what it is, and you might then be able to find out what to do with it. So a lot of combinations of advice really.
So Natalie, what about this area?
So where that big fir tree is, you couldn't get any further. My husband spent about 20 minutes once trying to just come in with a strimmer. I'll clear the way, I'll get through here. 20 minutes later, he'd literally cleared a space about like that. It was so overgrown. So we got a company in to clear it for us. They came in with their big diggers, pulled all the trees up, left the really big, well-established trees, and then we seeded it with grass.
And so you seeded it rather than getting turf in?
We did, we seeded it.
Is that because it's cheaper, or you just thought it would be anything?
Cheaper and time of year. We thought it just needed to be watered continuously if it was turf.
So with the front lawn, you didn't reseed it, you simply just kept digging it up and mowing
We
it,
did.
and it slowly returned to
It's
lawn
slowly
again.
returned to normal. You keep mowing it and keep mowing it,
Yeah.
and the rabbits keep eating it. You gradually get rid of the weeds.
And in terms of looking at the trees, how did you decide which were to stay and which were to go?
So anything that's showing any signs of weakness or decay went out. We wanted space between them so the children could play. I also asked the people to take off all the lower branches so that children didn't catch them as they're running around. So as you can see, they're all raised up a bit. And then we put more trees back in around the wildflowers.
And so what made you decide on a wildflower area?
We always wanted one. It's the prettiness of the flowers, but also just for the bees. I think we need to help the bees. And it's taken a while for it, because we did that by seed as well. And we had seeded it right down to the end, but it just didn't take with the shade, because the sun comes this way, so it was too shaded down there. And it wasn't taking properly, so we decided to make it much more of a flowy pattern rather than a strip down the garden, which is how it started originally.
And in terms of creating the children's play area, what was the thoughts there?
They really wanted a trampoline, but my son has mild cerebral palsy and I don't like the big ones that are raised off the ground. Yeah. So many children, even perfectly able children, quite often chuck their legs down. So if you want a trampoline, it needs to be a ground one. So my poor dad and my husband spent quite some time digging out the hole for the trampoline. But it is so good, and everyone that comes now says it's how much better it is than a normal trampoline. My daughter wanted this to swing on, so that's concreted in. I don't know how we get that out when she's got a bit too old for it, but we'll worry about that later. We wanted something where they're safe, but they're all up the top of the garden. This is sort of their area. That's their playhouse with their things in. They go in there. Last October we did the patio. It was all brick patio before, but it hadn't been put down, levelled properly, and it hadn't got any under barrier or any weed proofing. So literally the whole patio was covered with weeds. And as much as I pulled them up and my husband jet washed them, they just kept coming and coming. So for 3 years we battled with it. And for a couple of weeks a year it looked really lovely when we just dealt with it. I thought, oh, this is really nice now. And then a month later they're all covered with weeds again. So we thought, no, we need to do it properly. We took the whole lot up. And around the side of the house there's now a huge stack of bricks waiting for another project. And we've put big limestone slabs down, and then we want to retain some of the bricks. So I wanted a brick path that brings you from the house out to the lawn. And that's a nod to the previous brick patio that was there, but it's put down and cemented in like a wall, so the weeds won't be coming through.
And so you reused the bricks, the original bricks?
We did. We didn't want new bricks. We were adamant we wanted it to look old. Yeah. And the guys that did it, they kept saying, "Are you sure this one's a bit battered? This one's..." And I said, "No, I want them to look old." The whole point of it is that we're reusing the old bricks.
And you also changed the wall and the gate and the access to the garden. So explain what you did there.
Originally, this was the farm allotment, so they had all their vegetables here, and the access from the house onto it was through a narrow gap, say wide, between 6 foot high wall. When we bought it, that had been widened out, but it was still 6 foot high, and I wasn't happy that I couldn't see the children playing from the kitchen, so I suggested that we took the wall down where I could see but retain the height at the edges. So I initially said to the builder, can we just sort of chop the edges off the wall, and he suggested, why don't we curve it? So I'm really delighted that he said that, because it looks so much better.
Is the tree there, was that there originally?
The tree on the patio, yeah. Yes it was, but it was completely overgrown and it was taller than the house. Yeah, we didn't change the shape of the beds at all, but we've put an extra brick course in. So it's just raised them up slightly so we can put some more soil in, because the soil in there wasn't very good. And rather than start afresh, we've kept what was there, which we tried to do everywhere really, is keep what was there, but make it more suitable. So it's got an extra brick course and then a load more topsoil.
And in the lawn we were just on, the trees, there's a lot of very mature trees, probably planted Victorian times. Yeah. So how did you decide to deal with those? Because presumably those were very overgrown as well.
They were all grown into each other, and we wanted to keep all of them. They really work well together. There's spiky ones, there's light coloured ones, dark coloured ones. And all we wanted to do was just separate them. So all the bits that are overgrown from here into this tree, trim those off, and just so you could see it was tree and tree. And
you presumably also made sure you got qualified tree surgeons to do that?
We did, yes, yeah. And he also took off the tops of all of these. So he was up there with his chainsaw tied onto the tree. The tree was swaying. I was watching from back there thinking, oh my goodness. But he's topped out all of those. I don't think they've ever been cut. They were so big.
And when did you get the hens?
They came from our old house. They free ranged completely at the old house, but there's foxes here unfortunately. So live in there most of the time and then come out when we're out in the garden and we know they're safe, but they're happy in there.
And you've now found a solution to the rabbits, so tell us about that.
We have, yes. We have got quite a watership down situation here. We've put the fence in all along here. There's a wall on the other side. And then my husband's gone along the other side of the fence on his hands and knees, bless him, putting in a load of chicken wire, digging it in, putting stones and gravel on top of it, and they absolutely can't get in this garden at all. I've not seen a rabbit in here now for 2 years, so I think we have nailed it. The other side, it's full of rabbit warrens. They roam free. I'm happy they do that. That's their side, this is our side. The flowers are in here. They're over there, that's fine.
And you've got one bed though by the front door, which you have put a low, rather nice ornamental low railing in.
Yes, that's a recent change. That was the one flower bed that was there. It's had roses in it. It had some really overgrown lavender that had gone all woody, which I pulled out. And I thought, well, they don't eat the roses or the lavender then, so I'll buy some more roses and lavender, because they don't touch those, except they did. They liked the young lavender and the young roses, ate the lot. So I thought, no, it's time for a fence.
Yeah.
I don't want to shoot them, I don't want to get rid of the rabbits, they live there, but we just need to put a fence around the roses. It's really good. It comes in panels and you just slot them together with poles, easy fit, it looks really nice.
And then you add the chicken wire as well, because they could presumably just about get through.
Yes, so
Yeah.
the adults probably couldn't get through, but the babies certainly could. So with chicken wires along the back with cable ties. Quite simple, but I don't think you really see it. Your eye goes to the fence itself rather than the chicken wire.
And tell us about the paths, because you've actually created some paths and you're restoring others.
I think historically the paths were all there, but lots of them are completely overgrown. Lots of them have got, I think they had mud pushed through or washed through on top of them. Most of the working farm paths were concrete. That was all cracked and broken, but it was obviously, it was a working farm, worked fine for the farm. And we've added the gravel on the top, and then other paths, we've widened them or made them a bit more architectural, I guess, rounded the corners.
And also I think paths actually give a garden a framework.
They do,
And I
structure.
think you've shaped that area where the lavender and roses are by making that broad curving path. You've really created some shape in there.
I think the path was there, but it was more done through footfall, I think. There was no visible path, it was lacking in grass, as if it had been walked on or wheelbarrowed on so many times it had gradually worn away. So we thought, no, it does look lovely, we'll widen it and turn it into an actual structural path.
I've done house renovation before, but nothing on this scale with the garden, and I think it's fair to say we underestimated what it would take to bring it back, but I'm so pleased that we did it. And now, you know, I come on the driveway and I think, well, we're just custodians, aren't we? You know, and our job is just to preserve it and make it as good as it can be so that it's still here in long after I've gone. So I pull on the driveway every time and I think, crikey, I'm so lucky to be living at this property.
I've got another video on 8 tips on renovating a larger garden with advice from Stephen Ryan of the Horticulturalists, and I'll put that at the end of this video. And let us know your tips on renovating derelict gardens or abandoned gardens. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.